There was a time when industrial companies and cities dumped waste into nearby streams and rivers. There was little thought to what kind of impact it had on water and wildlife. According to EPA reports, there were some rivers like the Willamette River in Oregon that ran red with blood from nearby meat packing companies. The Boise River also had similar problems. In an Idaho Department of Health report from the early 1950s, it describes the Boise River as black and foul-smelling, very different from the Boise River we know today. Every summer, hundreds of people float the Boise River. Some even try their hand at fishing. Water quality is monitored and enforced by the State Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency. Michael McIntyre is with DEQ. He says water quality today has improved. The problems they face today are very different, and it usually starts with money.
We don't have all the funds we would like to in terms of manpower and laboratory costs and going out into the field taking samples. So we have to do the best we can, and sometimes that means making decisions on less than perfect information.
One hurdle they face, a growing sentiment that water quality is no longer an issue.
Here in Boise, I flush my toilet, I water and fertilize my lawn, I drive a car every day, so we all have a hand in it in some way, but perception is everybody's reality, and my perception is different from yours, different from Nicole's, so that's probably the toughest nut for us to crack in terms of getting over that initial, well, we don't even believe we need to be doing this. We don't even believe it's impaired.
Believe it or not, even with 40 years behind us, there are still hundreds of Clean Water Act violations. For instance, hundreds of towns across the Northwest are failing to meet clean water standards for their wastewater treatment plants. The city of Burley is one of them. The city owns and manages 2 wastewater treatment plants. A new $30 million state-of-the-art municipal wastewater treatment plant, and an old industrial treatment plant once owned by the J.R. Simplot Company. Mark Mitten is the Burley city administrator. He says despite its old age, the industrial plant met EPA standards. That is until the EPA issued a new permit in 2009. Mitten says the discharge limits were greatly reduced, and that's when the plant started failing discharge allowances.
We told them that would happen. We didn't have enough processing capability in that plant to meet the new permit, and they issued it.
The EPA reevaluates wastewater treatment plants every 5 years, or at least tries to. When the new permit was issued, it took into account a major change at the industrial plant. Simplot built the plant several decades ago to handle potato waste. Now it has to treat waste from several companies, including a milk producer. Because the use changed, the permit changed. If the plant doesn't meet the permit, it opens the owner to hefty fines. Mark Mitten says they tried to meet the new permit requirements by leveraging both wastewater treatment plants.
And so we hooked them together and tried to balance the loads to stay within those permits, and sometimes it worked, and unfortunately sometimes it didn't.
Industrial waste is piped a quarter mile to the new municipal plant. But when the industrial users operate at peak capacity, the waste overwhelms both plants. During these times, both facilities fail to meet EPA requirements. Mitten says the city is preparing to renovate the industrial plant. The $6 million price tag will be paid for by the companies that use it. Mitten says the renovations should make the plant work better. But Mary Lou Herbert, who manages both plants, says the upgrades might not fix the bigger problem, capacity.
In other words, I can't put 3 gallons in a 1-gallon bucket. So if they want to send me 3 gallons, I've got to increase the size of the bucket.
Mitten says increasing the size of the industrial plant is something they're looking at, but it will take time and more money. The wastewater challenge Burley is facing is unusual because most cities don't have industrial plants to manage. But many cities are facing aging plants that will need costly upgrades or replacements. This isn't the biggest problem Idaho rivers face today. Farming is the single biggest reason rivers are failing to meet standards set by the Clean Water Act. It turns out the problem isn't so much what cattle ranchers and alfalfa growers are putting into the water, it's what they're taking out. Ted O'Neill, a longtime rancher in central Idaho, describes what happens to the Pacimari River every summer.
We actually have to dam the Pacimari River off to get our decreed rights filled at this time of year.
O'Neill and other ranchers use heavy machinery to put dirt and rocks in the river's path. The water is redirected to a ditch. Almost every drop is used to flood irrigate farmland all summer long. The Pacimari Valley is a narrow seam carved into 50 miles of steep mountains. Before this land was homesteaded in the 1800s, great volumes of water rushed down the Pacimari River. Even after reaching this valley, the water from snowmelt and an underground aquifer ran cold. It was excellent habitat for salmon and steelhead. Jimmy Martini's family has worked the land here for 4 generations. He recalls stories his grandmother told, what it was like to actually hear the fish.
She'd lay awake at night and she could hear the fish coming up the creek. She said it sounded like a herd of horses coming, you know, and it was, of course, that's a long time ago, you know.
Martini and his wife took over the operation in the 1960s. They didn't see fish in their section of the Pacimari until 2 years ago. The absence of salmon and steelhead, a sign that something was wrong. Michael McIntyre with DEQ.
And a lot of what drove that was water temperature issues and just the water management.
When valleys like the Pacimari were claimed for agriculture, trees along the streams and rivers were taken out. That made more land available, but removed natural shade that kept the water cool. After farmers channeled water out, the remaining stream runs shallow and warm. Temperature is a big reason sections of the Pacimari River is considered impaired under the standards of the Clean Water Act. Warm, slow-moving water has less dissolved oxygen the fish need to breathe. The temperature also causes the fish to burn up valuable energy. To lower water temperature, some farmers are getting help, switching to new ways of irrigating their crops. Better management tools like sprinkler pivots instead of flood irrigating uses less water, but it comes at a cost.
As a rancher, I can't afford to go in here and put them kind of systems in, because you're talking several $100,000.
That's Jimmy Doughton Sr., a fifth-generation rancher. Doughton turned down several offers to help partially fund a pivot sprinkler system. He knew he couldn't cover even part of the cost, so he stuck with flood irrigating. That all changed when the local Soil and Water Conservation District said it could cover the entire cost, thanks to grants.
If you sit on the fence, you're going to rip your crotch out. But if you progress, get off to the right side, you're going to keep it going. But you can't straddle the fence.
Doughton jumped from one side of the fence to the other. He even constructed fences to keep cattle out of the river and moved his farmland farther away from the river to prevent fertilizers from leaking into the water. Remember Ted O'Neill, the farmer who's been blocking off the Pacimari River to divert water to his fields? He's applying for help to get the same water-saving irrigation system Doughton is using. If it all works out, O'Neill will still get what he needs while leaving enough water for the fish.
It would tickle me to death to see water in this river year-round. You know, that's a big plus to everybody, including myself.
But even sprinkler systems aren't the ultimate solution. Many farmers believe that less standing water in the fields will lead to less water recharging the underground aquifer. The impacts, Doughton says, could lead to problems with well owners years from now. Agriculture is one of the few exceptions to the Clean Water Act. In some cases, it's up to farmers to self-correct. That hasn't been easy and most certainly has been slow. But there is evidence all this hard work is paying off.
Yes, I think it maybe not to the extent or as fast as people would like, but I think, you know, kudos to Congress in those days that recognized the importance of water quality.
The agencies, both federal and state, vow to continue working to improve water quality and quantity in the next 40 years. For Idaho Reports, I'm Kunz.